Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. And boy, oh boy, it's one of those times where I'm actually grateful that I decided to do a show later in the day, have some work getting done on the house right now, and so I pushed the show back a little bit, and boy, am I glad I ever did. Now, in fairness, the updated thumbnail and the description of the episode and everything, I felt pretty good about it before I went live, and then Nick Sirianni proved to be the gift that keeps on giving. We're going to get into a lot today. Matvei Michkov, scratched. Is it the right call? Is it a bad call? I'm going to break down a radio host's thought on it and give you my unfiltered take on that. We also had Tyrese Maxey is injured. That's bad, bad, very bad. Jim Curtin, the manager of the Philadelphia Union, fired. We'll get into that and some of what may have led to it. Certainly some of the thoughts that are going around the Philadelphia Union and began to bubble to the surface of late. And of course, we have to get to this Nick Sirianni thing because Captain Foot in Mouth decided that I guess Friday's the perfect time, right as you're going into a game against the Dallas Cowboys, to potentially reveal to the media that Jalen Hurts is in fact nursing an injury that wasn't reported, wasn't on the report. Now we could start in a whole bunch of different times or a whole bunch of different things, but I am going to go out to the comments here really quick over on YouTube. And who is here? Who should be with me at such a beautiful time on a Friday afternoon in a relatively unannounced show with probably, 15 minutes notice, other than Ford, who says, Ford again supporting this freakish John Lovitz character in the middle of his workday. Go Ford. Ford, you're a good man. At least I hope. Because if I co-sign you as a human being now and then you go off and do something stupid someday, I'll just have to delete this video. But there's a lot going on in Philly sports. And now, I think that despite the fact that this is a late-breaking thing, I do think we have to start with the Nick Sirianni gaffe because it is just inexplicable. And some of you may not have seen it yet. And by the time this hits the podcast feed, some of you might not have heard it yet. But I want to throw this because we're going to do a whole thing about like whether or not the Eagles-Cowboys game really means as much these days. And I would say no. And with Dak Prescott being out, I would say it probably doesn't mean nearly as much as it used to. But boy, Nick Sirianni, about 2 hours ago, met with the media. It was around noon on Friday, met with the media. And they were asking about Jalen Hurts not being available or not being a participant in practice. and he wasn't listed on the injury report. And so I'm going to throw this over to Nick Sirianni. You can listen to the man himself, and I'm going to tell you why this certainly wasn't a gaffe that there's much of an excuse for. You certainly can't be confused about who the reporters are talking about. But let's throw this over to Nick Sirianni at a press conference with the media where he apparently just revealed that Jalen Hurts may, in fact, be hurt.
You haven't really seen Jalen be held back for load management before. What was behind that on Wednesday?
Yeah, he's dealing with it was on the injury report, dealing with the ankle, and just making sure we're precautious with everything.
What's wrong with the ankle? He wasn't on the ankle.
I'm sorry, Jalen Hurts. It was an ankle?
What's that?
It was the rest.
That was the rest, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
I thought you were talking about something else. All right.
Is Jalen dealing with an ankle problem?
Now rest.
So it's just rest. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, can Nick Sirianni be trusted? Perhaps he was confusing Jalen Hurts with, I don't know, maybe Jalen Carter. Could that have been what happened? Because the reporters asked, and I believe that was Zach Berman, asked the initial question about Jalen Hurts and about him being load managed, apparently. And Sirianni says what was on the injury report. All right, well, in fairness to Nick Sirianni, then let's go to the injury report because maybe this is just fake news run amok. All right, let's take a look at Wednesday's injury report. Devontae Smith, hamstring, did not practice, limited. Nolan Smith, groin, did not practice, limited. You keep going down. A.J. Brown, we knew, working his way back from the knee, was a full participant on Thursday, limited on Wednesday. Josh Sweat, Slay, Juergens, Mekhi Becton. All right, so there is a guy who has an ankle injury. Mekhi Becton. Does Mekhi Becton sound like Jalen Hurts? No. Was it listed as load management for Mekhi Becton? No. All right, well, maybe there was somebody else who had an ankle injury. Oh, Ainias Smith. Ainias Smith. Does that sound like Jalen Hurts? Oh, no? Maybe if Nick wanted to make the case that he was revealing something about Devontae Smith and it was about Ainias Smith, you'd say, all right, well, it's still Smith. Or if it was Jalen Carter was listed with an ankle injury, but no, Jalen Hurts, and also Jalen Carter's not on the injury report. So, Raggy, why is that bad? Zoink, Scoob! Because having Jalen Hurts not on the injury report or just saying he's being rested, load managed, and not injured could have a significant penalty from the NFL. Look, you have to look at this from a whole bunch of different ways, right? There, of course, is just the ongoing and the never-ending thing where you say, okay, from a competitive advantage standpoint, you don't necessarily want to let the rest of the league know if your star quarterback is hurt. You don't want to let the Dallas Cowboys know that he's hurt. But the leagues are effectively in bed with all of the major legal online sports books. And the knowledge that Jalen Hurts might be injured could significantly change betting odds, which has a ton of money riding on them. The last time I looked, I believe the Eagles were a 6.5-point favorite on the road in Dallas, where they have not won in 7 years. And I'm going to double check right now. I'll go to one of the fine sports books that I work with in my day job. But I'm now kind of interested to see if the line has moved at all. Let's see. The Eagles are a 7.5-point favorite as of right now on the road against the Cowboys. That actually, Dallas plus 7.5 might all of a sudden be a lot more enticing because on whatever off chance Jalen Hurts misses Sunday's game, Dak Prescott won't play, you would think that maybe there's a chance that having Kenny Pickett as the backup or as the starter maybe isn't going to give you as a favorable of a result, or certainly not the kind of blowout that apparently the odds makers believe Sunday's game could end up being. So once again, you have Nick Sirianni, meets with the media, has an ultimate foot-in-mouth moment. There is no explaining his way out of it. You could see he was caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I mean, we're going to go back to this really quick just because the face that he made was pretty great when he realized he was absolutely screwed. Because they come back to him and they say, so he's not injured. And then there's, all right, let's just throw it back over here real quick because you got the face. The face tells you everything you need to know. It's this guy right here. Yep, that's you farted and you blamed it on your little brother and your mom bought it hook, line, and sinker. That's that face right there. Hook, line, and stinker. Huh? Yeah, it's not good for Nick Sirianni. Not good. Could the Eagles face a fine? Potentially. Yeah, if you willingly and knowingly withheld the injury status of your franchise quarterback, even though it was midweek, that could be a fine. So I'll be interested to see what happens there. Luckily for the Eagles, it's kind of like a Friday news dump. Again, it doesn't look like it moved the line at all, at least with one of the books that I just looked at. But that could be a big problem. That could be a headache for the Eagles. Best of luck. Now, I want to get back to the Eagles and Cowboys later on, because I did want to have this conversation about whether or not Eagles and Cowboys is really as big of a rivalry as it used to. And I'm still not sold that it is. So I'd like to get back to that later on in the show, and then it kind of propels us into the weekend. But there are other things that happen in Philly sports, believe it or not, in Dallas week that I think are worth getting to. I'm going to start with one thing that happened that only has short-term ramifications, and then one that has probably longer. So we'll go Flyers. Then we will do a somewhat rare thing here about the Philadelphia Union, and then we'll get things back on track. In a somewhat surprising move, the Philadelphia Flyers scratched Matvei Michkov against Tampa Bay, against the Lightning. And it's not something that I thought would never happen. In fact, I think we all knew that just based on the fact that John Tortorella is the head coach, we all kind of knew the day was going to come. Like, we all kind of knew in our heart of hearts there would come a day, there would come a time where Torts would bench Matvei Michkov, and we'd have to see how the kid responds, and that there would be a day that he would scratch Matvei Michkov, and Michkov wouldn't get to play at all. Thursday night was the latter. We had seen a few times in the course of Michkov's season, of his rookie year, that he has been sat at times, but Thursday night was the first time that he was left out of the lineup entirely. So John Tortorella was met by the media in Tampa and was asked about the decision to not play Matvei Michkov against the Lightning, who, by the way, they were going to be playing against a team that Nikita Kucherov happens to play for. And a lot of people were very excited about the possibility of seeing Michkov and Kucherov playing against one another, but they were deprived of that. Note that the Flyers didn't choose to scratch Michkov at home in front of the fans that are paying the money to see Matvei Michkov. But I want to go over to Torts' pregame availability and let the man explain to you why he decided to scratch Matvei Michkov, and then we'll talk about some of the reaction. Here's Torts, pregame.
You answered any of these questions already, but I just see Matvei is out for tonight.
Yes.
What is it that he's not doing that you want to see him do?
Just part of the process.
Is it more a teaching thing?
Just part of the process. Yeah. I mean, I told you guys, with young guys, they can watch games too, as far as development. So it's trying to help them.
With Anthony.
Now, and that's where we're going to stop. So Torts, to his, we're going to have a weird moment here, because I'm as critical of Torts as anybody. I have been as critical of Torts as anybody. He did tell you this was going to happen at some point. He didn't come out in the offseason and say, Matvei Michkov will sit for X number of games. He didn't say, Matvei Michkov is going to get scratched a bunch and you're just going to have to deal. Put up or shut up. It's fine. He did tell you that there were going to be learning experiences. He did tell you, and he has kind of shown through his actions in the past, that especially with young players, if they aren't doing something right, and he gives them multiple opportunities and they don't execute at a high level, they're going to watch a game from the press box. Now, do I totally agree with the decision to sit Matvei Michkov? No, not necessarily, because in fairness, the team as a whole hasn't played particularly well. Entering Thursday night, they had the fewest points in the National Hockey League. Now, they did pick up a big 2 in a shootout with the Iron Giant, Ivan Fedotov, in net. But in fairness, this Flyers team has been dreadful, okay? They have been bad in virtually all situations. The one place that Matvei Michkov has brought you consistent value has been on the power play. But as a 5-on-5 player, an even-strength player, Matvei Michkov looks like a 19-year-old who's adjusting to the NHL. He has not been infallible. He's been a very good player. He's a truly dynamic player. he doesn't necessarily have a lot of talent on this team that is able to read the game as quickly as him. He certainly has missed out on probably at least 4 points this season where he set up his line mates in an advantageous position, and if they could actually finish, he'd have a few more assists. I wasn't shocked that Torts scratched Matvei Michkov. I'm not going to call for Matvei Michkov or for John Tortorella's job based on this, but I am going to note that, like, it's certainly going to upset people because he's the only reason at this point that most Flyers fans are still watching, given the lack of success that the team has had this season. But I'm going to throw it to somebody who it certainly seems like has a lot of opinions about the Philadelphia Flyers. So I'm going to go over to the Drive Time show of the station that owns the rights to the Philadelphia Flyers, that airs their games, because you would think that if somebody's going to know what's going on, it has to be the person who hosts the Drive Time show, the afternoon drive show of the flagship station. So I'm going to go to Tyron Johnson, who apparently thinks that this is a fireable offense. None of the other stuff to this point has been, but benching Michkov yesterday. This is before the game. This is when the news came out during the day that Michkov would be scratched. So I'm going to throw this over to Tyron Johnson on what is certainly not the best show ever, but they do have the question mark at the end asking for our feedback. Is it the best show ever? Here we go.
Flyers coach, they need to now get a new coach. I never thought Tortorella was the right coach for a rebuild. Then we find out today that they're going to bench Michkov to, quote, help him. No, that doesn't help him. Benching a 19-year-old who's still, according to the advanced metrics, your third best 5-on-5 player because he struggled 5-on-5 for a while. He'd have 6 more assists if he was playing with good teammates. You're the wrong coach for this situation, John. Respectfully, walk away. This is not a good position for you. You want to win every game. This is a developmental situation. Respectfully, walk away. You don't want to do the job that's required, which is developing a 19-year-old by letting him play. Aren't the Lightning really good?
Yes. Typically are, yeah.
Can't you get really good playing against really good competition? Instead, he's on the bench. Thanks, John. Respectfully, walk away.
That's the flagship station. Okay, so let's dive into this one a little bit, because for people who don't watch hockey a lot, or for people who maybe didn't have something to talk about on a Thursday, it certainly stands to reason that it could maybe make a little bit of sense. Give a little bit of love, a little bit of attention to the Flyers. It's great. That's great. It's supposed to be a good relationship. It's actually kind of nice when the flagship station, actively talks about one of the teams that they own the rights to the games for. So, okay, let's break this down. John Tortorella is the wrong coach for a rebuild. Tyron is correct, which I've been saying this entire time. I have been on the record, whether it was on this show, whether it was on Snow the Goalie, for the entirety of John Tortorella's tenure in Philadelphia. The only reason I was happy that John Tortorella got hired was because I knew it would lead to the firing of Chuck Fletcher. And the moment that happened, I was good. We were totally fine, because Tortorella has never been a rebuilding coach. Now, there are some that will argue that Tortorella has had some success in the past of developing some younger talent, okay? And there were moments last season where it looked like guys like Owen Tippett were taking a step forward. It looked like there were moments last season where Travis Sanheim or Cam York were taking a step forward. It looked like at some point Torts might be unlocking another level to Travis Konechny, who's not a young guy, but is certainly not like a mid-30s player. Okay. And then you look at this season and how it's gone. Now, Owen Tippett has looked better in the last 2 games, but Tippett has really struggled to start the year. Joel Farabee has been virtually non-existent through the first 11, at least through the first 11 games of the season, was practically non-existent. Morgan Frost has gone anywhere from looking like, maybe the best option to play as a dynamic, quote-unquote, line with Matvei Michkov, as much as he's looked like a guy who doesn't belong at the NHL level. So those are a few young guys that have not progressed. There's a case to be made that just overall, many of your younger players have at the very best plateaued and in a lot of ways have regressed. Now, like I said, Tippett the last couple of games has looked better. He's a streaky player. But until the Farabees and the Frosts of the world come back around, it's hard to look at this from a macro view and say John Tortorella has been directly responsible for the legitimate development of, let's say, 4 players on this team. Okay, so I will agree with Tyrone. He's not a rebuilding coach. It's not the best situation. I think the team should have moved on from him last year, especially given how the end of the season went. And I've litigated this many times on this show about how he handled the Sean Couturier benching last year. So I don't disagree. I think fundamentally that's right. Here's where the issue, though, okay? I don't know which 5-on-5 advanced metrics Tyrone was looking at. I genuinely don't. It's the beauty of advanced analytics, right? You can find an advanced stat that could make a player look much better than they are, and you can find an advanced stat that makes a player look much worse than they are. I have no idea what metric he's looking at, but in fairness, most of the Philadelphia Flyers team has not looked good at 5-on-5. They have not performed particularly well at 5-on-5. And even all that in mind, if you watch the games, you would still know that Matvei Michkov doesn't look comfortable at even strength. You would still know that by watching and understanding what's happening in the game, that Matvei Michkov doesn't look like a guy who's in his 5th or 6th NHL season. He looks like a 19-year-old who's still transitioning from the KHL. When they have the man advantage, he's about as lethal of an option as the Flyers have had probably since Giroux on the left circle. But Matvei Michkov has this move where he comes around the right circle, he gets himself central, and he kind of like whips a wrister low, and a lot of times it finds the back of the net, puts the biscuit in the basket, and everybody goes home happy on the Pico power play. But he's not a great 5-on-5 player. So again, I don't know what the model was. I don't know what model that was based on. I don't know what model those advanced analytics were, but Matvei Michkov has not been one of their 3 best 5-on-5 players this season. That's nonsensical. And I'll take it another step further, just because I can. The notion that a young player can't get better from taking a break and watching the game from the press box is not true, okay? There is a layer and a level to giving a guy one game to be removed, to see the system, to see everything unfold from the upper levels. Because if you don't know this, if you haven't gone to a hockey game before, or you've just never experienced what it's like to watch hockey from the balcony level, let's say, like where you can go find me, Ant, and Bundy for the Press Row show at every Flyers home game. If you've never watched hockey from up top, you can watch everything in the play developing. When you're down by the ice, like I was last night, thanks to my good friends over at Caesars Sportsbook, I was at the Rangers-Sabres game at MSG, and we were 2 rows off the ice. It was a great night. It was fantastic. I actually snuck a Flyers logo in the backdrop of these little kids in Rangers jerseys after they were like losing 6-1. And I put the Flyers logo on there, and the camera guy wasn't too thrilled, but that's kind of funny anyway. Got a picture on the ice at Madison Square Garden too, wearing the Snow the Goalie shirt. Good stuff. Anyway, if you watch the game from down low, you get a feel for how big the players are and how fast they are, but you can't watch everything unfold in front of you. When you're all the way up, you can see which guys are busting their ass on every play. You can see which guys are skating hard back to the bench. You can see which guys are lackadaisical. You can see who's lagging behind the play. In a lot of cases, you can see so much more about how the game is unfolding when an odd man rush is about to develop, when a goal is or a potential goal scoring opportunity is going the other way. You see the game from a different lens or through a different lens. So if you're a young player who's transitioning to a new league, who has had some success with the man advantage, who has been benched a few times because the 200-foot game isn't there, because there have been a few coaching points that they've tried to get through that for whatever reason aren't getting through, sitting for one game is not the end of the world. The reason that people are allowed to be worried, however, is that when John Tortorella historically has done this, it's not a one-game thing. It's a Morgan Frost going into the press box for a while. It's a Bobby Brink getting sat for a few games. There is a fair level of skepticism that this fan base has because of what Tortorella has done in the past. Now, look, we could also go with the Bobby Brink getting scratched in front of his home fans. Same thing with Sanheim. Like we could go that whole way if you really want, okay? There is nothing wrong with him missing one game. And I will say this. There is almost zero chance on this earth that John Tortorella is going to have the blessing. I mean, he gets to make the lineup. There's almost zero chance that John Tortorella is going to have the blessing of ownership or the front office to scratch Michkov in front of the Wells Fargo Center fans in the first, like, let's say 30 games of the season, because the people who bought tickets, right? The people who bought tickets in the offseason, they bought them to come watch Matvei Michkov. They're not there to watch Tyson Forster. They're not there to watch Eric Johnson. They're not there to watch Rasmus Ristolainen. They're not there to see if Alexei Kolosov is going to be able to stay at this level, who, by the way, was hurt, so that's why Fedotov had to be in there. They're not there for that. They're there for Matvei Michkov. He's the guy. He is the star attraction. They're not going to let him sit, Matvei Michkov, in front of the home fans, at least not right now. So if you have to get the point across to the player, and if you're going to do it, doing it against Tampa makes sense on a few levels. One, give him the ability to watch from that 300-foot level, or however the hell high press row is, right? The balcony level. You don't have to do it in front of your home fans. And in theory, Tampa's a really good team. You're probably going to lose that game. It just so happens that Ivan Fedotov played a really good game in net, and you won in a shootout. Hockey doesn't make sense, okay? It doesn't make sense all the time. But of all the things to get upset with Torts about, this one isn't it. At least not yet. Now, you will hear an entirely different tone out of me if we get like 3 games in a row of Michkov being scratched, or if it's every third game Michkov is scratched. Then you're going to have an actual problem. Like, then you're going to have the conversation about the coach, the front office, ownership. Are they all in lockstep or not? But one game, not worth getting too worked up about yet. Now I'm going to go out to the comments here. Ray Supper says, I was at the Flyers game last night. Fedotov was amazing. Torts didn't need Michkov last night. There you go. Ray with the picture, with the Stanley Cup. And that looks like with the, that must have been last year. I think that, I'm assuming, Ray, you let us know in the comments, but I think that must have been when the Stanley Cup was in Tampa, when they honored Torts, like last March, would be my thought, maybe. Anthony Sanfilippo, wow, checking in on X, says the backdrop of that Torts video makes it look like a proof of life video. All right, that's pretty good. And he also checks in, can't believe I'm saying this, but this is the most accurate take Russ has ever had on hockey. Look at you, fella. I knew you'd come around. C-Mac says, Russ, is there concern with Michkov learning English and fitting in that this team is now playing for itself and not Torts, and part why Matvei 5-on-5 isn't doing what Torts wants, apparently? I don't know entirely what that means, but no, I don't think it has to do with his English or his ability to learn English. I don't think that's why he's been benched. I don't think it has anything to do with his play or them thinking that he's playing selfishly. I don't think it's that. I do genuinely think that it's hard, okay? Because when you watch Michkov, I went off on the Scott Hartnell thing on Crossing Broadcast like last week or 2 weeks ago, and we talked about it on Press Row Show. The idea that Michkov is like supposed to kill the creativity, to not attempt a Michigan or to not attempt a no-look pass, that to me is silly. Like, don't curb what the guy is able to do. He's a high-skilled player. You haven't had a highly skilled player in a very long time, or a guy that has the kind of level of talent that Michkov has, okay? But at the same time, I get that like it could become a talking point about make a smarter play. I wouldn't try to coach those highlight reel plays out of Michkov, especially not right now. Again, if he had teammates who were capable of burying the puck when put in an advantageous position, you wouldn't have that conversation at all. It's just that on one hand, he processes this game at a totally different level. I've made this comparison before. It's like he's watching the game at like 0.75 speed, right? Like he's able to slow it down just enough and he can read ahead. And you can see him kind of finding those passing lanes. And he's just processing the game at a much faster level. But at the same time, there are moments at 5-on-5 where he just kind of gets disoriented, or he gets caught slightly out of position, or he's not as quick to get back. And those are things that Torts is going to try to beat out of him. All right, like the idea that you're not going to get back to help defensively, you're not going to bust it right away, like that will get beaten out of you. You don't have a choice. And like to that end, then Torts is a good coach for him to get those habits out. At the same time, again, if you get to a point where Tort starts saying, like, we don't want him making those creative plays, then you have a problem, because then you're sort of wasting what this kid's upside is. C-Mac says the Flyers, since the Coots benching, are 7-17-2. I think that number is close to correct, if not totally correct. That's bad, very bad. Jim Cochran says all Michkov advanced stats are difficult to understand because they're in Russian. Respectfully. Jim, good point. Good point. JH says, have no idea why close seats are so much more expensive. The upper deck and the top are far better than the lower seats. Interesting. And JH also says it was funny how the announcers, because this was on ESPN Plus and Hulu, it was funny how the announcers prepared to talk about literally no other player than Michkov, and then Tortorella took them away. It is crazy. Like, I do recommend to you, if you're a hockey fan, or even if you're not a hockey fan and you're just like looking for something to do one weekend, if you have the choice between like a $50 seat down low or a $20 seat all the way up, go watch it at the $20 level, or buy the $50 ticket and then just meander up to the upper bowl and spend a little bit of time watching it. Like, a lot of times you think about it as like the video game perspective of like the top down. If you're playing Chell, right, and you're like legitimately over it and you see half the ice. When you're up in the upper level, like, you do see so much more and you process so much more than when you're at ice level. Now, being at ice level is really cool. Like, I'm not going to take that away from anybody. Ice level is legit. Because when you get to see how big these dudes are and how gracefully they skate and how fast the game is, you get an entirely different appreciation for hockey. Like, it's one thing to watch it on TV and kind of like lose the puck, but when you're actually sitting that close and you see it, it's insane. I was sitting there last night with a bunch of people who also work in sports betting. And like, a lot of them I think had been to hockey games, but I don't think that many had ever been that close to the ice. And it actually took me back to like COVID when we had the, I don't know, I want to say it was like 15, maybe 20 media people were allowed in the building at a time. This is like back when everything was shut down. Like a drive to Philly from my house took like 35 minutes instead of an hour and a half on game day, where all of the lower level was tarped off. That was the lowest I could remember sitting at games consistently. And last night at MSG was the closest I have been to the ice since then. It's just an entirely different experience. It's certainly worth going. Like, if you have the opportunity to sit close to the ice, by all means do it. But from the processing of the game, you want to watch it from up top. Like, that's what it is. Joe Papel, who happens to have seats very close to the ice, behind the goal, says you're in the game at ice level. Yeah, it's like a totally different feeling. It's a very different experience. Lower level, you definitely feel as you get closer to the ice that you're part of it. You have a more visceral reaction to everything. When you're all the way up, it's almost having like more of the analytical approach. All right, so Michkov being benched is not the end of the world. If it continues, it could be significantly more problematic. And that's where we're going to leave it for now, because I have no idea if it's going to continue. Hopefully it won't. Now, Monday, the Flyers are back at home against the San Jose Sharks. I might be doing press row show with Bundy and intern Andrew. I might not. I have a bunch of meetings in New York next week. So I have no clue if I'll be there. If I do, it'll probably be pregame and then drive. Do I want to spend an hour and a half in the car going from home down to Wells Fargo Center to do a 20-minute pregame show and then drive 2.5 hours from Philly to New York? I might just do it. I'm insane. It's entirely possible that I'll do it. Anyway, we're going to go for Michkov. We still have other things to get to. And for some of you, this might not be the most encouraging thing, or this might not be the most engaging thing, but I'm going to promise you it is worth sticking around for. Plus, we're going to talk a little bit of Eagles and Cowboys at the end of the show. But there was a really huge story that broke, because after 11 years, 10.5 seasons as the head coach of the team, Jim Curtin was fired, let go by the Philadelphia Union. And again, while not everybody who watches or listens to this show is a big soccer fan, I have to explain to you why it's such a big deal that Curtin was let go. Anytime you have ever followed a Philly sports team, especially of late, okay, let's say the last decade, you never had to worry that the Philadelphia Flyers were going to spend money. You didn't have to worry that Philadelphia 76ers were going to spend money. Josh Harris may be a very flawed owner in some ways. You never have to worry that he's going to spend money. He spends. Comcast Spectacor spends on the Flyers. John Middleton, we all know, spends on the Phillies. Jeffrey Lurie spends for the Eagles. The one team in town that does not, the one team that seems absolutely allergic to opening up the pocketbook and shelling out some cash, even if it means getting over the hump and having a legitimate chance to win MLS Cup, to win the championship, it's the Philadelphia Union. For those of you who are unaware, 2 years ago, the Union make this amazing run. They make this incredible run to MLS Cup where they play LAFC, which is this unbelievably expensive team full of designated players or players who would have been DPs. It's a little bit too complicated to explain. All at once, you get 3 players that you're able to spend beaucoup bucks on that kind of like, they don't circumvent the salary cap, but you're not allowed to like go out and outspend everybody the way that like the Yankees and even the Red Sox did like 20 years ago in Major League Baseball, where it was just like they were at this totally other level and everybody else was way down here. Or like the way that when the Flyers were super, super successful, they just outspent everybody. They would just outbid everyone. So the Union played LAFC, and they were very close to winning MLS Cup, despite the fact that they had a fraction of that money allocated to their team relative to LAFC. And then Mbaizo lost Gareth Bale on the far post, and then it went to extra time. It went to a shootout, and the Union lost. And it's still a very painful memory because they lost, and then the Phillies lost the World Series. So it was a bad night. That was a bad Philly sports night. If you thought it was bad as just a Phillies fan, imagine being a Union fan who watched that happen, that collapse happen, and then watched the Phillies get eliminated. I digress. So Jim Curtin has been put in this position now in his entire tenure as the manager of this team, that Jay Sugarman, who actively refuses to pay money of any significance for players, Jim Curtin has been expected to work miracles. Now, I will say very clearly, I don't think Jim Curtin is like a tactical genius, okay? I don't think that, like, if you look at the entirety of his tenure here, we've seen some pretty stagnant systems over the years. We haven't seen a lot of fluidity. Then there was a time that Ernie Stewart was here and said that the players were only capable of playing one system. Jim Curtin always kind of fell into a lot of the same substitution patterns. You almost could have it down to the minute. Just not ideal, not great. So you set all of that aside and you go, all right, what exactly was he supposed to do? He was supposed to turn chicken shit into chicken salad. And in a lot of cases, he made it work. They won the Supporter Shield a couple years ago. They made MLS Cup. Then, instead of going and saying, all right, we were one player away, we were one striker away, like a legitimate striker away from winning MLS Cup, instead of taking that opportunity, channeling a little bit of your inner John Middleton and saying, get me this trophy, Sugarman was pretty much like, now we're just going to run it back. Now they have this executive who's, you know, the equivalent of, say, like a Keith Jones or maybe like a Jones and a Briere, or you could say sort of like a Daryl Morey, a Dombrowski, right? Ernst Tanner, who can find a guy in like the third tier German league, or could find you some guy in a Scandinavian league you've never heard of, and they pluck them out, they put them on the Union team, and Jim Curtin or some combination of the coaches and the players themselves, they turn into all-stars. And no one ever understands how they do it. It's almost like dark magic, but they make it work. Okay. Curtin has had to like work with those constraints. You're never going to be able to actively compete with any kind of high money team, right? You're never going to get that big money player, that big money designated player to take this over the hump. And in fact, the Union have spent so much of the money that they have made on their academy system. Think of it like the minor leagues. They fund this academy, they find prospects, they find these players, they try to instill all of the things that they want in these players. They teach them a system that they're going to then play through Union 2, which is kind of like your, I don't know, AAA team or whatever. It's your one level down. And then when you get up to Major League Soccer, when you make it to the top, you're going to know what you have to do, and you're supposed to just be able to kind of plug and play these guys. Except when you do that and you don't spend at the senior level, you're kind of like perpetuating this thing where it's like, all right, well, is the goal to just have like 7 years from now, all these academy kids come up and they all just like, they've spent all these years playing together, and now all of a sudden they're going to compete with teams like LAFC that can just go out and spend beaucoup bucks. Like, that doesn't exactly work. So Curtin was in a really tough position. And things started happening throughout this season. They missed the playoffs for the first time in quite some time, it felt like the wheels started to fall off a little bit. So I'm going to take you to a clip from a game that the Union played against Columbus, where Taylor Twellman, who was once the color commentator for the Union in the early days, who's obviously gone on to find a lot of success with ESPN, I want you to hear from back in August from the Leagues Cup what Taylor Twellman had to say about the job that Jim Curtin did and what is expected of him. Because Taylor Twellman is obviously a much more knowledgeable, plugged-in guy when it comes to MLS than I am. I want you to hear what he has to say. Now, again, Curtin, not infallible, not the perfect coach. I just want you to hear from somebody who understands this at the league level what he had to do. All right, let's throw to this.
What's amazing about what Jim Curtin's done in Philadelphia, since 2018, they have the second most points behind LAFC. And yet, during that same time frame, they're in the bottom 4 in roster spending. And I think
I want to go back and play that clip again because it is so telling. We'll go back to the points that they've earned and the spending.
And yet, during that, they have the second most points behind LAFC. And yet, during that same time frame, they're in the bottom 4 in roster spending. And I think at some point, this team and this franchise can take the next step. Look at what Columbus has done. Going out and getting those 3 or 4 quality players to go along within the manager's mindset. Jim Curtin has proven he can get you to there. But in order to get over the hump, Will Fernanzi will tell you, sometimes you just need the cream to rise to the top. And this team's got it. And I think Philadelphia now is going to be in a little bit of a transitional period of trying to find where their cream is.
So that gives you a full context idea from somebody who's very well respected in Major League Soccer and U.S.-based soccer, thinks about the job that Curtin has done. Second most points over that time span behind only LAFC, who won MLS Cup against the Union. 4th lowest spending team in the league. Okay? That's not normal. To find the kind of success and continuous success that this team had, that falls on, to some significant extent, Ernst Tanner for finding these guys on the scrap heap. It does come to Curtin and his coaching staff for being able to put together a cohesive unit. And it comes down to the players believing in each other. So we're going to go from there, which, by the way, is something that we should probably feel pretty solid about. And I'll give the credit there because I saw he's here in the comments. Jose Nunez is the one who clipped it over on Twitter from back in August. I want to take you guys to what one of the standout players on the Union said back in October. Because this, to me, I think is a much more telling thing. Like the levees started to break this season between Curtin post-game hinting at the fact that, an X million dollar player makes an X million dollar play, very clearly putting a lot of the onus on ownership to go out and get a guy who measures up, who has the kind of skill that this Union team didn't have. Kai Wagner is a guy that they found, I believe, in third-tier German league, right? Became the best left back in soccer. Would not have been playing with the Union had it not been for a very not great remark he made to another player last year and killed any market that there was for him. But Wagner played a full 90 minutes, and this is right when they got eliminated from playoff contention this year, which was something that going into the season nobody expected. You run it back after running it back. Eventually the wheels do fall off, but this is what Kai Wagner had to say. Now, mind you, Union players typically very buttoned up, hadn't prior to this season really vocalized a lot of concerns. This is what Wagner had to say. I think everybody has to look in their own heads now and ask themselves, did I give everything this season? That reflects the whole season. It's the players, it's the owners, it's everybody around, it's coaches. Everybody has to reflect on the season now. And then he also questioned some of the mentality of his teammates. He said, I love all of our homegrown. Those are the homegrown players, those academy players. But you don't win games in this league with just homegrown. And I think we have to get back to getting winning players who have the mentality to win every game. I saw too many players today in the locker room who really probably didn't care that we got knocked out of the playoffs. I'm kind of filling in here for some of the German to English. That's something that really pisses me off. When you have players who like don't care and just go home now and think, okay, nice, I have a vacation in front of me. I'm not a player like this. This will stay with me. The 2022 MLS Cup stayed a lot with me, a couple of weeks. So I think that's even worse today, probably, not to make the playoffs. So that's one of the leaders on the team. It's one of the best players on the team. It's one of the most highly regarded players on the team. Said back in October, all this and included ownership, okay? There was a big spat. If you go back to some of the early episodes of this show, which are available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, I flipped out on the Sons of Ben because I said the Sons of Ben were, cowards and frauds and, gave lip service and, kind of gutless and don't exactly do things that you should do as a supporter section to, potentially put some pressure on ownership. And, some of them got upset and whatever. Doesn't matter. The Sons of Ben were supposed to stage like a big protest that I think amounted to them like leaving a banner in the Sons of Ben lot, and they didn't take the TIFO into the stadium. They didn't really execute much of a sustained like walkout or a sustained we're not going in, because for whatever reason, the supporters section thinks that the players, the 20-plus-year-old players, the 30-plus-year-old players are children who need to be coddled and know that we the Sons of Ben support these players. We support them. We do, and we just want them to know that we care. And so we're not gonna vacate the River End because these players need us, and without us, what are we? What are we if we're not there as the supporters? What kind of message does that send? It sends a message to the entire league, and most notably to the commissioner, Don Garber, that the Philadelphia fans are pretty pissed off, and they're especially pissed off that their cheap-ass owner won't spend money on the team. Now, there are certain financial constraints. Jay Sugarman isn't a multi-billionaire. We're not dealing with a Mark Cuban refusing to pay money. We're not dealing with Josh Harris. We're not dealing with Comcast Spectacor or John Middleton or Jeffrey Lurie. We're dealing with a guy who probably, relative to a lot of other owners in Major League Soccer, doesn't have the same net worth, okay? So we'll give him like a little bit of an out. However, as I mentioned before, when the Union have made money, they typically take that money and reinvest it in the academy. They aren't going out and spending that money to bring in an impact player, even if it is a guy who's on the downside of his career who could still come in here and make an impact. Gareth Bale, when he went to LAFC, wasn't peak Gareth Bale, but you know what he did? He was a big player, a big money player, even at the end of his career, who made a big money play, who nailed a header on the far back post and took the game to extra time, and eventually helped LAFC win the MLS Cup. Sometimes you have to spend money. That's that old adage. You have to spend money to make money. You do. In the case of Jay Sugarman, he doesn't really have to spend money. He will make money, and whenever he turns around, hopefully sooner rather than later, and sells the team, he'll make a nice return on that investment. But in the meantime, Union fans are just kind of left scratching their heads again. It's one thing to make the playoffs and be disappointed because, once again, the cheap ownership didn't put out enough talent for them to get over the hurdle. Them missing the playoffs this year is catastrophic. It's the kind of thing that you couldn't allow to have happen. I spent years saying, when the Phillies were bad, spend money on the Union, spend money, put together a winning team in the summer. You'll capture plenty of casual fans. You'll get people going down to Chester. It's a beautiful park. It's a night, like there's not a bad seat in the house. And they didn't do it. And when they finally did get better, it was as the Phillies were starting to, make runs to the World Series. Now, they've still built their fan base, but man, you miss the playoffs after running it back, you effectively can lose a lot of those casual fans. You can lose people who might have had interest. All right, I'm going to go over to the comments. Jim Cochran says, hopefully Jim lands with a team that will spend money to win. He deserves that. Ford says, the Union loss in the finals was and is an all-time choke job. Absolutely incredible how bad they blew that game. And Bizo, he lost Gareth Bale on the far post, and that was it. Jim also says, thanks for bringing up that night. Got to go call my therapist now. I'm sorry, Jim. I'm sorry. Ford says, Russ offers counseling services under the Joy Media umbrella. That is not true, but maybe someday. Joe Papel says, will MLS ever really pay big money? Football players go to Europe to play in the great leagues. It's akin to the hockey players go to the NHL, not the KHL. Yeah, I mean, MLS will pay, right? Like Lionel Messi plays in MLS. Now, he reportedly got a percentage of the Apple TV deal, which is bananagrams. Teams make multi-million-dollar moves. The Union don't. It's that simple. Jim says, I assume they'll be promoting the U2 manager, the Union 2 manager, like I said earlier, like kind of like their AAA team, right? Like you have one level down. Homegrowns for the win. Nope, I don't. No, just not good. Let's see. We're going to go over to Jose, who says, just bad at being self-aware. Comms department has been lacking this year. They're not used to having to be humble due to being shit. That's another problem. When you start to get an organization that for a long time was bad, and a lot of those people who were there when the team was bad and like had to cultivate good relationships with media, when those people are gone and the people who are brought in don't have to be used to a losing team and kind of get to rest on their laurels. Now, I don't know if that's the case. I'm taking Jose a little bit for his word there because Jose does go down and cover the team. If there's a negative relationship there, or it's certainly not as glowing as it used to be, I can tell you that from being around other teams, when you have a team that's winning, sometimes those comms teams aren't exactly the easiest to deal with because it's kind of like, well, take it or leave it, pal. That would not be very encouraging if that's the case. Joe Papel says, how does Inter Miami afford all the stars, Messi et al.? It would take a long time to explain it. Designated player rules are in play. There's GAM and TAM money that you can use to buy down contracts. It's a little bit complicated. Some would say that there are ways that they circumvent the rules that are in place. There is LAFC has done this. Inter Miami has done it. NYCFC has done it. There are others. It seems kind of egregious, and it feels like anytime there's a big name considering a move to MLS, one of those teams is at the forefront. Let's see. Jose checks back in and says, missing the playoffs has so many ripple effects. Bad for scouting, negotiating with players, no continental competition, no additional home games. All true. All correct. It's a shame. And again, they blew it. Like, they missed their golden opportunity to pick up a lot of fans. And it's all because, or it's due in large part to the fact that they didn't support the head coach with high-value players. And when other teams around you are, eventually your talent isn't going to be able to outperform expectations to the level that this Union team was able to. It feels like a scapegoat move. It makes you wonder whether or not the relationship between the coach and ownership soured that much and that quickly. Was there an ultimatum given by the coach? You need to spend or I'm done. Jim Curtin's not going to have a hard time finding a job. I almost feel good on a human level that, like, Jim Curtin's going to be able to go on to a team that will spend, and, like, we'll get to see if he's a good tactical mind or not. Like, the way that I'm kind of, like, critical, and I've been critical of him in the past, you can go back to, like, old episodes of It's Always Soccer with Kincaid. When I was on that show, like, I aired out all kinds of grievances at different times about Jim Curtin and about his tactical mind. That doesn't ultimately matter all that much. Okay, like, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it does hurt a little bit. You know, like, if he goes on and say he wins MLS Cup with another team, it's going to leave a real sour taste in the mouth of Union fans. Union fans aren't going to hate Jim Curtin. They're going to feel good for him. But it's going to piss off this fan base and probably turn them even further against ownership. Jim Cochran says, what aging superstar wouldn't want to end his career in Chester, PA? God, who knows? Jose also says, total guess, I also wonder if it was pushing for another year of Bedoya and it became a big deal, just an added issue to the relationship. Who knows? Who knows? This was our Philadelphia Union segment for the first time in quite some time. We wish Jim Curtin the best. I have no idea what they're going to do. There's no manager who's going to be able to come in and work under these constraints and get anything more out of this team than Curtin was able to. I don't think if you dropped Jose Mourinho here, he'd be able to get a better result out of this group of players. I truly don't. You could bring Pep Guardiola. Pep Guardiola would sooner jump into the Delaware than have to try to manage his way through this. But I digress. Not ideal. Not a great moment. Now, I'm going to go full circle here. Okay, let's go full circle because at the beginning of the show, we talked about Nick Sirianni shoving his foot very firmly in his mouth. I want to finish today's show by asking all of you, especially those wonderful people on YouTube, X, and Facebook, are you excited for the Cowboys game? Because it feels like over the last couple of years especially, the juice just hasn't been there for Eagles-Cowboys. I don't even find myself getting that excited for Eagles-Cowboys anymore. Now, has it ruined things that the Eagles haven't won in Dallas in 7 years? I don't know. Maybe there's something to it, right? Is it just that, like, at this point, rivalries don't feel like they exist because Micah Parsons secretly wants to be a Philadelphia Eagle, and that earlier this season we saw Darius Slay go on his podcast, and, like, that's not something that you would have expected to see of, like, I don't know, Brian Dawkins going on Tony Romo's podcast. Do I think that would have happened? Probably not. I don't know. Could be wrong. Do I think DeMarco Murray would have had Brian Westbrook on his podcast at their peak? Probably not. I don't think rivalries really mean that much anymore. Like, if we're being honest, in the year 2024, there are very few rivalries in North American sports that feel anything like they did a decade ago, 2 decades ago. The way that players are constantly moving from team to team, the way that players are able to almost leverage their way out of one situation and into another, the fact that podcasts and other video mediums exist, the way that Players Tribune has allowed players to go directly to the public, the way that social media has fundamentally altered the way that players are able to communicate with the public, I think that it has taken a lot away from rivalries. Now, I think it's good content, and for the most part, I think it's actually good to see that these people are human beings. Maybe it gets people who are unbelievably psychotic about how critical they are of players to maybe just take a step back and go, oh, it's a sport. It's a game. Everybody just take a deep breath. But I don't view Eagles-Cowboys as the rivalry that it used to be. And I would even make the case that, like, just because of the geographic location of Dallas relative to a New York or to a Washington, that, like, it's far more easy to see a path to, like, having a legitimate rivalry with the Commanders and Jaden Daniels as it is Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. Like, I mean, this is the only league where a Philly team and a Dallas team are in the same division. There's not that big brother, little brother thing that you get with a New York. There's not that weird first cousin thing that you have with Philly and Boston. Like, do you hate the city of Dallas? I don't really care about Dallas. I don't hate them. Do I hate Dak Prescott? No. Do I hate Micah Parsons or CeeDee Lamb? No. Maybe daily fantasy broke everyone, right? Because I will draft Cowboys players if I think they're good. I had CeeDee Lamb for a few years. I won a couple of leagues. Like, maybe it's my fault. Maybe my openness to drafting players from other NFC East teams have killed rivalries for me. But, like, I don't get as excited about Philly, Dallas as I used to. Maybe it's just part of getting older and not allowing myself to, I guess, like, live and die with every play. But it could just be me. Ford says, it's less exciting without Dak versus Jalen. The Bengals-Ravens game last night was great. You had both marquee quarterbacks. That is accurate. But for whatever reason, it also feels like there's a lot more hate, contempt between Cincinnati and Baltimore than there is with Philly and Dallas. Joe Papel says that his Dallas hatred goes all the way back to Tom Landry. For Joe, like, sure. I remember hating the Cowboys early in the Donovan McNabb days. I remember hating the Cowboys when I was in middle school and I was in high school and even into college because you get drunk with your buddies when you're of age. You get drunk with your buddies and you hate Dallas together. But now, like, I just don't feel it. And I don't think people get as jazzed up. Like, I played that clip earlier in the show about, like, Matvei Michkov on The Fanatic, and it's like, in the past, when there's an actual rivalry with the Cowboys, the Flyers aren't even coming up as an afterthought. That, to me, is somewhat telling. Jim Cochran says the NFC East hasn't really been strong in years. Tough to have intense rivalries with bad teams. Fair. Dallas hasn't been nearly as relevant as the Eagles have been over the last few years. They certainly don't seem like they're going to be that relevant this year, especially with Dak expected to miss potentially, like they were saying earlier today, could be like 6 weeks, 8 weeks potentially. Like, Dallas' season feels like it's effectively done. Now, obviously, I say that now Dallas goes out and they win by like 2 touchdowns, and Nick Sirianni looks like a boob because he, leaves points on the board, and Dallas somehow makes them pay at Jerry World. But, like, I don't know. Watching Dallas play week in and week out on Sunday Ticket on the Multiview, there haven't been a lot of moments where I've been like, oh, yeah, Dallas was, you get a couple of guys back, and it's a real threat. No, like your biggest threat right now in the NFC East is Washington. And right now that's it, because we know the Giants aren't a real team. I don't feel the same way anymore. Now, on Tuesday's show, if it turns out that the Eagles get their doors blown off and you see the Cowboys players making a mockery of the Philadelphia Eagles, then maybe we're going to have a conversation on Tuesday about how pissed off I was at the Cowboys. But as of right now, I don't feel the same juice going into the weekend. The Eagles should comfortably win, unless Nick Sirianni, in somehow revealing, like we said at the top of the show where we broke it down for those who are joining the show late or might have missed it, like Nick Sirianni kind of breaking the news that Jalen Hurts is, nursing an ankle injury. If he doesn't end up playing on Sunday and it's backup versus backup and you lose that game and you lose ground on the Commanders, that'd be bad, bad, very bad. And then you're going to have a piss-off Russ Joy on Monday's Crossing broadcast and Tuesday's episode of the Russ Joy Show. But in the meantime, I want to thank everybody who joined me live on YouTube, X, and Facebook. Make sure if you haven't done so already, you like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. We're on the drive to 500 subscribers. Remember, when we hit 500, I will pull the name of a random YouTube subscriber. That person will win the jersey of their choice, worth up to up to $175. See, I changed that. Whew, saved myself. Up to $175. So if you want to win an Eagles jersey, a Sixers jersey, Flyers, Phillies, Union, whatever, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Okay? Very simple to do. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like this video, and if you can, leave a comment in the regular comment section, not just the live chat. Leave a comment. Let me know what you agree with, disagree with. Maybe you feel the same way about Michkov, maybe you feel a different way, but by all means, let me know. Subscribe to the channel, and if you are a podcast listener, this show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. So, thank you all for joining me. I will talk to all of you on Tuesday, and in the meantime, we can argue on Twitter. You can go follow me at Joy on Broad. Big thank you to everybody. I will talk to all of you next Tuesday on The Russ Joy Show. Have a great day, everybody.